Bill?
Yes. All right, I'll go to the podium. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to comment on the elevator speech, if I could.
Go for it.
Thank you. So irrespective of your approach to organizational change management, whether or not you bring consultants in or do a training program for state staff, I'm of the management philosophy and perspective that every project should intend to build an ongoing organizational change management capability within your organization. Whether or not that's a dedicated team or whether it's dispersed throughout your organization, you can go either way. But going through the process of a project is going to make your staff smarter, and it's going to help you deal with change in a very different way. And whether you're going into stable state operations, and I don't see too many places with stable state operations anymore, maybe Otterbeck. No. I think the principle here is state staff have to have the tools, skills, and capability to do good organizational change management, and their bosses need to say, this is important to our success. To the extent we talk about continuous improvement, continuous change, you need to have organizational capability to do organizational change management. So that's my elevator speech. So I'd like to start with a story. Again, may I diverge and tell a quick story? Okay, all right. So I grew up with two deaf parents, myself and three younger sisters. And growing up, particularly in my teenage years, my mom asked me a particular question every day, at least every day that I was in school. Can anyone guess what that question is?
What did you learn today?
No. Did you do your homework today? And what do you think my answer was 100% of the time? Yes. Yes. My answer was always yes. But what do you think my mom would say in response to my yes?
Let me see it.
No, she didn't she didn't say show me. But 100% of the time when I was fibbing, she would say, you didn't do your homework. I'm like, how do you know this, right? Every single time I didn't do my homework, which was about 50% of the time, she would bust me and say, no, I know you didn't do your homework, go get it done. And it took me years to figure that out. Well, my body language gave away, whether I, moved the eye contact away or I said yes hesitatingly. I'm not sure what gave it away, but my body language was giving it away. And the reason I share that story is it taught me an invaluable lesson about listening to your audience. And so for my mom, I was her audience, and she was paying real close attention to what I was saying. And while she didn't listen with her ears, she listened with her eyes, and she knew what I was saying. And so for me, in doing project work, it's really taught me a lot about listening for understanding, because oftentimes in change management and in other areas of projects, we're so busy trying to deliver a message. I have this checklist of information that I need to get to the project team or to stakeholders or oversight agencies, but I'm not necessarily listening to what are they really concerned about. And so what I would encourage you, and I intend to tie this to my piece of OCM stories, is I would encourage you to listen for understanding as you engage at the team level, at the colleague level, with your boss. Understand what his or her questions are really about. What are they driving to? When you're dealing with executives or oversight agencies, try and think through, what are they really asking with this line of inquiry? So what I was going to talk about in my remarks is building bridges with the program through an effective organizational change management approach. And so in healthcare services, we have a whole variety of programs under the Medi-Cal umbrella. We have state-only programs, and we have the larger Medi-Cal program. Our program deputy directors, my peers in the organization, are incredibly busy people. They're busy working on regulations, implementation of Affordable Care Act, legislative analysis, program analysis, responding to inquiries from the legislature, and then we're bugging them about an IT project, right? And so where do you think the relative priority is for them when we're asking for resources? Do we think it's high, or do we think it might be a little bit lower in their priority?
Not high.
Not high. You're absolutely right. The other thing I'll share is in my role as an executive, we talk about how management and what we're focused on as managers. And I've come to the conclusion that the majority of my work, and I won't tell you how much of a majority of my work, is about working through change and resolving conflict, right? A good chunk of my work is monitor and control, the project management principle, are the trains running on time, doing some planning. But a good chunk of my time, in some weeks, 100% of my time, is managing change and resolving conflict. And so my sort of war story is that we had an important business deputy director that we needed to get resources from, and we had done an environmental assessment and stakeholder analysis, and we thought we had checked off the checklist of how to get this program deputy director engaged into the project. And this is for system replacement of a 30-year-old mainframe system, implementing a new suite of products for our system replacement for Camus. And so we got a tepid response and a halting interest in providing us subject matter expert resources. And we sort of reached an impasse, and we had a heated discussion. I won't say it was a fight, but what we heard back from our program deputy was, "This is your IT project. I need to run my business, and the pressures of doing that, you want to take my best resources, and I can't run my business without them," right? And so a real world conflict. And we had to address a fundamental misperception about, who is this project for, right? Because we really are delivering business value for their program area. And what's interesting is, and it gets to the point of listening for understanding, is the whole time we were talking about needing their subject matter experts to work on the system, this individual was thinking, well, my subject matter experts don't even use your system. They're not the end user, right? But they are the folks who define all of the policies, which are then reflected in all of the requirements that drive the engine of the system. And so there's no way we could confirm the current environment, current requirements, and build the to-be design of the system and configure it for California to meet California Medi-Cal policy need without these business policy experts, irrespective of whether or not they were a user of the system. But for a while there, we were sort of talking past each other, and it took a couple of things from an organizational change management to align our expectations. One is we have a strong executive sponsor who is willing to sit down and talk about, well, what is the relative priority, and was able to reaffirm, maybe reinforce, that the project we were working on was a priority. Number two, we had a heart-to-heart discussion about what was the nature and the expertise that we needed on this particular project, and we were able to make clear that without their policy experts, we could not be successful in confirming requirements. We were then able to have a business-based discussion with our program deputy director about the risks of non-participation. Because the reality is, if the system didn't meet California policy requirements, what would happen? We would pay out provider payments incorrectly, either less, more, not at all. And what would happen? There would be an upswell of complaining. providers would be upset, their associations would make their concerns known, and who would be responding to those concerns? Well, the director, and this program deputy director would have a big role in having to respond to those concerns. And so I think being able to articulate the risks and the challenges helped forge a stronger mutual understanding of why we needed the business at the table. From an organizational change management approach, one of the things that we had to overcome in this conversation was the notion that the program could come and do requirements and then go away and don't bother me until you've implemented the system. And from an organizational change management approach, we used our governance approach to assert the principle that the business needed to make business decisions. And so while we, on the IT side of the house, are facilitating making sure the system happens and managing the contract and managing the vendor, the business still needs to make the business decisions that drive the shape and nature of how that system is designed. There's the technology, but then there's the policy layer over that, how we're going to configure it to meet California's business need. And it took us a little time, but we finally got to the point where the business owner was in a position and understood that they had to own the decisions. So in governance, when we made decisions about going one way or another in terms of a piece of functionality, we finally got the deputy director and his designees to participate in that governance process. And we don't, this morning we talked a little bit about governance in the context of organizational change management. And I was excited to see that, because sometimes we think of governance and organizational change management as two totally separate things. And I'm very much an integrationist in terms of your project management disciplines, your governance approach, your organizational change management all have to work in concert to have a successful project. I think the last point that I would leave you with is sometimes we focus on the sort of senior executive level decision maker as the focal point for we need to get him or her engaged. I think what I learned throughout this process is that you have to be able to engage at every level in the organization, at the team level, at the subject matter expertise level, and it's building those relationships, because for us, we had to bring subject matter experts from downtown Sacramento to our West Sacramento site. We had them embedded into our team for a period of time, and now they returned for a period of time back to their regular duties. But those relationships, those communication channels, the involvement in the progress of the system development continue. And so whether or not your program folks are every day throughout the project embedded in your team, you have to, from an organizational change management point of view, have those strong communication linkages with the program folks. So that's a little bit of experience, maybe some painful wisdom that we learned along the way. What I can share with you, and I think I said it earlier today, it probably took 100 conversations with this deputy director for us to get to the point where roles and responsibilities were clear. And so I encourage you, as you engage in organizational change management, it cannot be a single conversation with a single audience. You need to listen for understanding. You need to make sure that your audience is hearing your message, but you need to make sure you tailor your message to the needs, interests, and risk sensitivity of that audience. So that's a little bit of my experience, and I'm glad to take questions. In the back, yes?
Did you have roles and responsibilities delineated for those participants, whether they were just decision makers or?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question was, do we have roles and responsibilities? And early on, we did have a RACI matrix, but it did not fully enough or clearly enough articulate the roles and responsibilities. And and we didn't do a good enough job of identifying what the business decision maker's role was in governance. And one of the comments I'd share is we've made the shift to Agile, and one of the nice things about going to Agile is you have a very clearly defined role for product owner and how they integrate into your sprints. And that helps solidify that sort of business voice of the customer in our sprint implementations. Other questions? At least one more question?
Did you ever go to the director and complain about this program director?
Did we ever go to the director? Well, we talked to our sponsor, right? And throughout the day, we talked about executive sponsorship and the role of an effective executive sponsor. We of course had to talk about, here are some of the risk areas as we see them. But I will tell you, it wasn't a one-way street. And I think the project had to learn as much about being clear about what we needed. We weren't clear enough because we were thinking of them from the perspective of course you want to participate, you're a policy designer, right? And they were thinking, hey, we don't touch the system. The only thing we get is an output of a set of federal reports and state reports. So that's my limitation in terms of being a user. And it really took us understanding their perspective and then having that next level conversation to sort of break through those assumptions that were causing us to talk past each other.
How long did it take to come to consensus?
Too long. How long did it take? It was a couple of months of some, difficult conversations. But, the important thing is we got there. Being in project world means you got to be persistent, right? And I think we were persistent. All right. So the next person up
is Kenny.
Can everybody hear me okay if I stand away from the mic?
Yes.
Great. So my story is very short.
No, you can't.
How's that?
I don't think the microphone's on.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Yes.
Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. My story is actually very short. And it touches on managing change that's unexpected and that disproportionately hits a subset of stakeholders. And because it's short, I think we'll have time, and I would really love to hear experiences that some of you have had in managing change that's either unexpected or disproportionate or both. And I think I also have a little bit of time. I'd like to circle back to a previous topic because I thought of a joke, but it was long after the joke session was over.
We can have the joke session.
Be careful,
anytime.
Kenny.
No, it's not the one. I Googled change jokes, and the one that I found, I'm not going to tell that one. But the change joke that I do want to tell, how many executive project sponsors does it take to change a light bulb? Guess is only one. Only one. She holds the bulb and the world revolves around her. Okay, so my example project from my story is it was a small dedicated project that we did a year or two ago to automate processes for our legal office. It was a legal case management system. We knew it was going to drive a lot of change because it was automating currently manual processes. But those changes were planned, and we had a good, strong executive project sponsor who was a change champion. There were other change champions really at all levels. Like I say, the changes were planned. But then what hit us that we didn't expect, we had a number of users, a number of stakeholders in the legal office who use assistive technology, specifically JAWS and Zoom Text. And we had checked with the vendor that was providing the solution to make sure that the solution would be compatible with those technologies, and we were told that it would be. And we just said, goody. Oh, good, okay, so we can move forward. And we didn't think to check and make sure. We were well into the project. We were having challenges. Projects always have challenges, but they were being managed. Morale was high. Things were going well. And then it became very apparent that this solution did not work with either JAWS or ZoomText. And so we had some unexpected change. And it really threatened the project. Marie mentioned how important morale is on a project. Morale was high, and it threatened to nosedive, and it even threatened to disrupt the cohesiveness of the project team, because we had some stakeholders who really wanted to move forward. It's just the system's going to work for me, and we can fix it for these other people later. But we have California Government Code 11135 that says that our technology needs to work for everybody. We have IT Policy Letter 1010 that says our systems need to work for everybody. And we're fortunate on this project. We had a really good, strong, engaged project manager who was also the change manager, who was able to bring the team together and get that team spirit back, and this system's going to work for everybody. And so we quickly did some research. We found that other departments, had we done our homework up front, we wouldn't have run into this, because other departments had run into this same thing with this same solution. And they were able to point us in the right direction to bring in a consultant who could modify the solution so that it would work the way we needed it to. And I guess the lessons learned that I took from this was, first of all, expect the unexpected, no matter how well you plan for change. And we could have, had we done our homework, better plan for that one, but you'll still run into things that you don't expect. So expect the unexpected, and when the unexpected happens, deal with it in a way that doesn't disrupt the team. And I have 4 minutes left.
About three and a half.
So I would love to hear other experiences that some of you have had with change that's unexpected, with change that was disproportionate. I know you've had some. I'm sorry, Marie first.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for including our users who do have special needs, because I think that's one thing that we often forget about, is that we do have some users who do have the special needs. I've worked on systems where some users were very concerned because their first language wasn't English, and our systems were all in English. And that was a fear that we had to overcome, because they wanted to know why they weren't able to have their screens in Spanish or another language. So it's trying to deal with the diversity of our users that we often forget about, and that's an important thing for organizational change management to look at.
So among Marie's many roles is she serves on our department's Disability Advisory Committee, and she and I have these kind of conversations quite a bit. And other comment?
Hi, my experience is I was hired to create an organization, a group of people, hire the staff in, and to upgrade an application that the division chief thought was very, very important to her role. And so I worked with my staff, took, a year or so, in understanding what the application did and the data, and we came up with a plan how we were going to modernize it, and we took it to a customer group, and we presented it to them, and we said, okay, we have these 3 alternatives, which one do you like? And they said, how about alternative? Turn it off and have it go away forever. My jaw dropped. I was totally shocked that the folks who were really, it was their data, and it was hurting their businesses, so I was totally shocked that this job I'd been hired to do, that spent a lot of time on, was not well respected or needed by the community. So then I did a survey to find out who is using this darn thing. Turned out to be students at universities So then I had to go through a process of organizational change management to convince my management that this application was doing a disservice. The data was so bad, it was scientific data, and the data was so bad, it was a disservice. And that took a couple of years to try to convince management that this should be turned off and the resources that we hired really needed to be focused on internal needs of the division, which had been ignored.
That's very brave to be able to come out and say that my project didn't succeed and we're better off to go in a different
I
direction.
waited till after I passed probation. But yes, it was pretty scary. It was definitely rocking the boat big time at that point, and that application was turned off and has not been replaced.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. I'm going to talk very briefly about a project that I had the privilege of overseeing, but was not directly responsible for when I was in the Department of Corrections, and that was the Strategic Offender Management System. And when you think about change management, the first thing you ought to think about, if you don't think about it, is the business, right? The business has to own the problem. They have to know they have a problem. They have to want to fix a problem, and they have to want to own the solution. And SOMS really, to me, is an example of a project where the business actually did that. And part of the reason that I think that's so unique is because of just the overall footprint of what the Department of Corrections is. So when you think about the Department of Corrections, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on them. It's an $8.5 billion budget. They have 137,000 inmates, 60,000 parolees, 57,000 employees, and 35 institutions. And the goal was to bring all of that together. And then to talk about the processes that had to be automated. So the processes, when you talk about managing an inmate, you think should be very simple. And you have Russ Nichols here who actually led this entire effort. So at your disposal afterwards is really, I think, a project director guru that if you don't tap into his experience, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. But the processes that extended in the system included intake, movement, counts, scheduling, holds, warrants, detainers, visitation, sentence calculation, and classification. Did I miss any of them? Programs. So you think about all of the different processes that had to be automated, right? And we had some level of automated data, but I would in no way call it automated systems or processes. It was a strictly data collection that we did. And the data collection was done at every institution individually. And it only came together overnight, right? It was not live data. And you think about the inmate population and 137,000 inmates and recognize that about 2,000 to 3,000 of those inmates are on the road on any given day. They're on a bus, moving from one institution to another. And we didn't have automated records. You didn't have automated what we call a C file. So as an employee, you have an employee file that has all of your information in it about you as an employee. The same thing exists for an inmate, and it's called a C file. That wasn't automated. So when you moved an inmate, you had to manually pull a file and actually load it on a bus with an inmate and move it with the inmate. So that when that inmate got to the next institution, that institution had information relevant to that inmate so that they would know really important things such as where can I house them? What are their needs? Do they have medication needs? Do they have physical needs? You know, do they have social needs, right? Because they don't all get along in the prison. They're different than on the street, right? And so when you think about that in total context, it's a lot of change that had to occur in a project. The other thing that I think was really interesting and unique about the project is that it's a $250 million project. And what was the first thing that Mr. Gopal Kapoor said this morning on a $250 million project? Guaranteed to fail, right? Too big. And it was too big. And one of the things that I think Russ did very effectively was break it up into small pieces. But he was only able to do that effectively, I think, because the business was behind him on it. And so what you had in SOMS was an executive sponsor and an organization on the business side that said, hey, this is ours. And we're going to figure this out with you, IT, and we're going to be behind you on it. And we're going to send you our best. and we're going to dedicate to it, and we're going to give you additional monies when we have to figure out how to give you additional monies to try to make this thing happen. And all the way through the process, when you talk about you know, all the business processes that had to be built, right? Because you're bringing in automation, and they didn't know what that was about. You have correctional officers in a prison that didn't use computers. They didn't have to use computers. And now they can't do anything with an inmate without using a computer, right? So the expansive change management that had to occur was really, to me, probably pretty phenomenal, and greater than I think I've seen in any IT project prior to that or since that. And looking at the whole portfolio of IT projects that we're implementing in the state of California at this time, almost every single one of them are implementing a project where there's automation and process existing, and you're simply changing that for the people, right? You're asking them to upgrade their technology. This didn't do that. This actually said, you will now use a system, and you will learn how to use a computer. And you would think, well, everybody knows how to use a computer. That wasn't necessarily the case, right? You get a lot of people out there who, our kids use our computers, right? When I need to look something up, you know, you ask your kid, right? You ask your 15-year-old kid, hey, you know, do that thing called Google or whatever and get me some answers, and they pull magic and they get you what you need. And so it really was pretty unique, but I think it was unique in that the business fully owned it. I think that's the example that has to stand out when we talk about change management, is that, you know, IT does not drive business. IT doesn't lead business. Business leads through IT. And that partnership has to exist, or we don't successfully implement $5 million projects. And so I think, so when you look at where we are today with SOMS, you know, they now process through SOMS. There's about 50,000+ users. So almost every individual in the Department of Corrections is a user of that system. They process about 84,800 visitors through that system in terms of maintaining information. 116,500 external movements. These are monthly statistics, just so you know. 27,500 reception center intakes on a monthly basis. That's new individuals coming into the system. 99,400 bed assignments and 1,255 master count transactions. And finally, 325,000 scheduling appointments on a monthly basis, all managed now through automation. And on top of that, you replaced 200 million documents. So you talk about a forest that was just saved in paper, right? And end result was about an $8.5 million in savings to the state of California due to staff reductions, which there in and of itself is another change management issue, right? When you're implementing technology and people panic and fear over the fact that they're going to lose their jobs, sometimes that's the reality, you're right. Sometimes people are going to have to lose jobs because of what technology brings in. And in this case, it was the right decision to make. It was the right thing to do to implement the system. But huge change management issues. And the fact that it succeeded, I think, is really the phenomenal story in and of itself. So, in closing, did I forget it? So we do provide you a toolbox. Yes, there's gifts. You're leaving before you get the gifts.
And the raffle.
And the prizes. Give me your book. No, I'm joking. You might have won. Did you know who they were? No. They left my session early. So we're providing you a toolbox. And those of you that were here this morning heard us talk a little bit about this, but you know, a toolbox is just that. It's a box of different types of resources that are available to you to aid you. There is not any one catch-all decision. You know, this is it. This one right here is going to have all of your answers in it. It doesn't work that way in the real world. It's a lot of resources and information that we felt would be valuable for you to walk away with, and to be able to then use that as you go forward and look at what you need to do in the areas of change management. Recognizing that change is It's not something, in my world, change is not something you do and you end. Change is constant. It is always, it never ends. Once you start any type of an effort, you start thinking with the business about a problem they have, you start change management right then. And it doesn't end ever. Through the life of the application's existence, change management exists because there's always things that have to be adjusted or modified, and then there's always a continuation of the need to train or educate or talk, right? And so, so recognize that these are really just exactly what they say, they're tools. You've got a number of, you've got a number of books that are in there. And then there's excerpts from books. There's, you know, the Heart of Change, real life stories of how people change their organizations. Great information, right? There's one on if we can put a man on the moon, getting big things done in government. And I think it's important to focus on the fact that, you know, there's 2 books in there that talk about transforming in state government. Because a lot of times we read these books and there's a hedge from the private sector, right? And you read it and you go, this is really great information, but I work in government. And government's a little bit more bureaucratic, or it's got different processes. In this book, I can't see how it's going to work, but there's a couple of books in there that really talk specifically about state government. Global Human Capital Trends 2014, Engaging the 21st Century Workforce. Critical, I think, today, if we start looking at what we're doing in the areas of technology and what that means to our workforce, because a couple of things, right? One, technology can result in a change in our resource needs, right? But the other thing that technology does, and we talk about people, is that in many cases we're bringing in newer technologies to organizations where we have 20 and 30-year-old technologies existing today. And we have people who have been supporting that 20 and 30-year-old technology for 20 to 30 years, right? And those people have a lot of really good information. They're not obsolete because we're bringing in new technology. But there's also a fear of how do they come around to that new technology, and do they want to, right? And so we've got to think about what is that human capital side when we talk about that 21st century workforce. So I hope you enjoy the resources that have been provided. These are provided at the benefit of the vendors that are supporting these events. This particular event, Deloitte and Delegata, were great sponsors for us. Really want to commend and thank Julie Quinn for her time this afternoon, and Brian Lee this morning in presenting, kind of the more contextual information about change management, and then recognize both Bill and Kenny for their, contribution of sharing life stories. We learn from each other, right? That was the message this morning. This whole event is about, learning from each other, sharing knowledge. Hopefully we've done that for you this afternoon and this morning for those of you that were here. Because at the end of the day, we only make things better in the way we deliver projects if we do it together. And as much as we want to think we're special and unique, and our department is special and unique, and the problems we run into are the problems that we're only going to confront in the world of my project, I promise you that is not the case. I currently look at all of your projects, and I can tell you that any of you that are struggling on your projects, you're struggling on the same issues that your partner is struggling on in another department. So don't feel alone, right? You're not on an island alone. You're on an island habitated by a whole lot of other people. It's probably really more a continent. So use these opportunities to share that information, to network and help each other. And if nothing else, reach out to the people that have done it well and have done it successfully. Great.
All right, the fun. So we're giving away 5 copies of the Heart of Change book.
That was my card.
If any of you, I think it's some extras. If any of you can find this on the back of your handouts, you are the lucky winner. Heart of Change handout. Anyway, there's something that looks like this. You found it. So you're going to come on down and scream and yell and say, you get a card, you get a book, you get a book. All right. We'll get to it. So that's it. That's all we have for today. Thanks everybody. Give yourselves a hand for all the Excuse me for 1 second. The other thing is in the toolkit is a list of all of our contact information. So if you have any questions about what you heard or you want to talk, to know that you're part of the village, to get these big problems solved, feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you all very much.